Google has done it. They're officially giving OpenAI a massive run for their money by launching the new Gemini AI. Today on the podcast, I'm going to be diving into all of this. For those that are wondering, I've been off the grid for the last couple weeks. You probably have seen, a bunch of interviews that I've posted. I haven't been covering the news for the last couple of weeks. I recently had a baby, and so I took the last 2 weeks off of doing kind of the more intensive news podcasts. And took a little break and hung out with the kiddo. So I'm back in action now. You can expect a lot more news podcasts from me. And this one is absolutely insane. I'm going to be breaking down everything that is announced and talking about a really interesting new demo from Google's Gemini, their visual aspect of it. So without further ado, let's get into it. The one thing I want to remind you about is if you are interested in investing in a new AI startup that is working with all of these new AI models, I've just launched the crowdfunding round for AI Box, my no-code AI app builder and marketplace. I'll leave a link in the description where you can go check that out. We've raised over $260,000 to date, and we are really excited about the future of linking together all of these incredible AI models, building you workflows, apps, tools, and letting you monetize what you're creating on our marketplace. But let's get into the episode. Welcome to the world's #1 AI podcast, AI Chat. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. In an absolutely unprecedented, or I guess maybe not unprecedented, but this is completely unexpected, I heard from a lot of sources that Google Gemini was delaying their launch. This is supposed to be the big GPT4 competitor. They're supposed to be delaying their launch till early, Q1 next year. This was like all over the place, but it looks like they may have pulled a bait and switch and have officially actually launched and started talking about this. So I watched an incredible demo of their visual aspect, which competes with GPT4 Vision, right? So Vision is on ChatGPT. You can upload, a picture of something and essentially it can see what's going on. Now, Google looks like they've taken this a step further and they have a live video feed that can do this, which is absolutely incredible. I'll break down the differences. Now, what I will say is with like ChatGPT's version, their GPT4 Vision, I would do things like upload a screenshot of my marketplace, for example, that I'm building, AI Box, and be like, hey, here's like the homepage. Give me some like design ideas or ways I can make this cleaner. And it would like come up with a bunch of lists. And then I'd be like, okay, great. With Dolly, give me some like design iterations, what those, your recommendations would actually look like. And it would actually like generate like versions of my app. And it was actually like great recommendations. So what I will say is, of course, OpenAI has been doing this, but it was more, you upload an image, you ask it a question, it gives you some text, you ask it for a picture, it sends your picture back. It kind of takes a while. It's incredibly impressive, obviously. But Google looks like they may have just leapfrogged this specific feature, and they're showing off some really incredible capabilities. So they released a demo video where essentially it started off with a person at a desk. They drew a squiggly line. And Google Gemini Vision is like watching this all live, and it's just like commenting on it live. So it's like, hey, I see a squiggly line. They kind of made it look a little bit more like a duck. It's like, oh, it doesn't have any edges. They put feet and eyes on it. It's like, oh, it's a duck. They drew like some water. It's like, oh, this is a bird in, the water. And then the person colored it blue. And what's interesting is now it's saying obviously can see color. So it's like, it's blue. Ducks aren't usually blue. They have a rubber duck that they pull out that's like a blue rubber duck. And they're like, would this float? And they're like, well, it's hard to tell you 100%, but it looks like it's rubber or plastic, and that, commonly could float. They squeeze it and it squeaks, and it's like, oh, if it's squeaking, then it definitely can float. So like, it is like watching in real time. And what I'm seeing here is, number one, sure, they started with a doodle and it could see a doodle. That's fine. Then they brought out an object. It could tell the object was 3D. Then they brought out a map of the world. And it's like, oh, you got a map of the world there. That's super interesting. And they put the little rubber duck on the map in like the ocean. And it's like, the rubber duck, they're like, the duck is in the middle of the ocean, far away from any food or any other ducks. It's probably not going to survive very long there. Like, so it's just like grabbing all this context. So then they take the rubber duck off the map. They're like, okay, create a game for me using this map of the world and create emojis. So it's like, okay, here's a game. you have to like point to the place on the map where these things happen. So it's like, guess the country that is the home of the kangaroo. So he like touches Australia on the map, and it's like, correct, you get a point. And then it's like, guess the the country that's won the most FIFA World Cup champions, and he touches it, and so it's like correct. So really, really impressive. Then of course they do the classic game where they like throw a bunch of cups on the table, and like, so here's one thing I think is interesting about this. So they put a bunch of cups on the table, they crumple up a paper ball and put it under a cup. They don't tell it like, hey, I want to play a game where you need to guess which one. It just says, oh, it looks like you're trying to get me to find which one has the paper ball under. So what's really impressive here is not just does it see what's going on and it could like parrot it back to you, but it understands the context of what's going on, which I think is really impressive here, right? You put cups on a table and you put a paper ball under one, and it's like, oh, you're trying to get me to guess, and it's like, yeah, I am. So then of course they shuffle up the cups and then it guesses where the paper ball is. Another thing it starts doing, someone just starts with one hand. They start playing rock, paper, scissors with themselves. Like they just like bump their hand a couple times for rock, bump their hand a couple times, do scissors, bump their hand a couple times, do paper. And it's like, oh, I see you're playing rock, paper, scissors there. The person makes like a bird with their hand, and it's like, oh, your fingers are spread out to look like a bird. They make like their hand into like a dog, and it's like, oh, your hand is like in the shape of a dog talking. Like it is so mind blowing because it understands the context of things and like strange things, right? Like putting your hand in the shape of a dog and making the dog's mouth like open and close. It could just be like, oh, someone's hand is moving, and I would be impressed if it said that. But it's like so much beyond that. It's like, oh, you're like making like a shadow puppet, like it just understands. So it's so incredible. They do like a magic trick for it where they put a coin under their hand, and it's like, oh, the coin's under your hand, and they lift it up and the coin's gone. They're like, oh, you used sleight of hand and moved it to your other hand. They have like a cookie and a coin, and it can tell you which one's a cookie, which one's a coin. They put an orange next to it, and this is a top-down view, I'll say. So it's like from the top-down view, I can imagine how this would be hard, but it's like, yeah, the orange is like, two-dimensional, and the cookie is flat, and then they keep putting like two objects on the screen at a time. So like an orange and a fidget spinner and a Rubik's Cube. And it can tell you like, the Rubik's Cube and the fidget spinner, these are both two popular toys. And it's like the orange and the fidget spinner. It's like citrus can be calming, and so can the fidget spinner. Like, so it's always trying to find like similarities. It's just incredible because you don't have to tell it what to do. It's pulling the context out of all of this. And then they did another demo where they like put two colors, like a green ball of yarn and a pink ball of yarn. And it's like, oh, those look great. You should try making a dragon fruit out of them. And it like generates an image of a dragon fruit out that someone created out of a ball of yarn. And it's like, or you could make a cake, and it's like a green cake with a pink heart on top. They swap it with a blue thing of yarn, and it's like, okay, you could make an octopus. And then they're like, tell me about animals I can make. It's like, you can make a pink or a pig or an octopus or a bunny rabbit. It goes through all these things. Absolutely incredible. I think Google is really making some leaps and bounds here. And this is something I've been talking about for a long time. Google couldn't just come out with something that was the equivalent of what ChatGPT already had or OpenAI already had, because they're just going to be playing catch up when OpenAI launches GPT-5. But before GPT-5 comes out, Google has a real opportunity to leapfrog them, and it looks like that's what they've done. This Google's Gemini Vision here is definitely a leap ahead of ChatGPT4 Vision. It's going to be really interesting to see how OpenAI responds. Of course, OpenAI has been embroiled in all of this internal politics, so it's definitely going to be something that's a little bit tricky for them. But this is absolutely incredible, and I think we're going to see a lot more really impressive things out of Google. Gemini actually has a ton of other features. I'll be covering a lot of the other things, but I wanted to cover specifically what their vision model is doing right now, which I think is absolutely amazing and is really kind of showing some of their advanced capabilities in responding to multimodal inputs, which is just a really impressive thing for an AI model like this to be doing. So very, very interesting. Thank you for listening to the AI Chat Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, I'd appreciate it if you rate me wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're looking for an innovative group of AI enthusiasts, make sure you check out our Discord channel and also our Facebook community. It's obviously a lot more interactive than a podcast, where we can actually share software tools, prompts that we're using in everyday AI. I'll leave a link for those in the description below.